morning, everyone. Assalamu alaikum and Ramadan Mubarak. It is truly an honor to be here with you this morning and to stand with a community that believes in something simple and powerful, as Jennifer so well outlined, that every human being deserves dignity. Samaritan Ministries of Greater Washington's work of walking alongside our most vulnerable residents as they rebuild their lives mirrors the spirit that has always driven me and Busboys and Poets. At Busboys, we try to create spaces where community, opportunity, and human connections come together, where a meal, a conversation, a poem, or a job can become the beginning of someone's next chapter. You all do the deeper, patient work of helping people take those next steps towards stability and purpose. And I am proud to stand alongside you in the shared belief that every person deserves not just charity, but respect, opportunity, and a seat at the table. A few years ago, one of my managers gave me a copy of the Quran. This particular manager was deeply devout. He fasted, he prayed, he went to Hajj, and he told me that he loved working for me at Busboys and Poets, but wished that I was a bit more pious. Now, how he knew I wasn't pious, I'm not exactly sure, although I suppose I've dropped enough hints over the years. He knew my actions did not conform to someone who's devout. I tend to avoid doing the performative parts of religion. Once in a while, I may have even declared that I'm an atheist. I'm not entirely sure that I am one, though, but I like saying it. It gives me a sense of urgency to act. It also feels like a small act of defiance, a challenge to the universe. If you're out there, God, prove it. Show me something. Save me the trouble of expensive retreats and too much introspection. Still, I told my manager I would read the Quran, and I did. But like all religious texts, it makes one enormous assumption. It assumes that the followers believe in something they can't see or touch. An act that requires faith. Faith. And that's the part that I struggled with the most. The idea of an all-knowing, all-powerful God that you're supposed to assume exists is a bit of a stretch, especially given the current state of the world today. A few months ago, I had the chance to meet the Palestinian Christian pastor and theologian from Bethlehem, Mundhir Ishaq, best known for his searing sermon entitled Christ in the Rubble. I asked him this very question: how can a loving God exist in times of horror like the genocide in Gaza? And not just Gaza, in the Sudan, in Congo, Nigeria, Yemen. What kind of God allows this level of suffering? What kind of God would allow a whole society to be devoid of empathy to kill others, to kill doctors, to kill nurses, teachers, journalists, destroy libraries, hospitals, and schools? Help me understand. What kind of God allows a narcissistic megalomaniac to become president of the most powerful country in the world and hand him the most lethal military arsenal known to humanity? Mundhir looked at me calmly and said, instead of asking whether God exists in times of horror, ask whose side God is on. God, he said, is always present with the oppressed, with the wounded, with the broken. And the horror we witness is not proof that God has abandoned us. It is only proof of what human beings are capable of doing to one another. And faith, he said, in times like these, is itself an act of resistance. That stayed with me, because I began to see faith everywhere. I see it in the mothers who lose their entire family in Gaza. I see it in the Catholic workers who stand vigil day in and day out in front of the Pentagon. I see it in my wife's spiritual practice. And I see it in the eyes of many people in this room who continue to believe in justice even when the world feels like it is collapsing around us. Faith, as it turns out, is planting a seed even when the sky looks dry, and believing that someday the rains will come and the seed will sprout. Which brings me to the moment we're living in today. We are living in a period of moral drought, not just politically, but spiritually, morally, historically. My family moved to America in 1966, and I didn't become a citizen until 1983. We had just invaded Grenada, and I had no idea where Grenada was on the map. I couldn't understand how we could invade a country thousands of miles away, and yet things seemed so normal here. And I felt strange pledging allegiance to a flag of a country that can invade other countries with such impunity and depose their democratically elected prime minister for no other reason than the fact that we did not like their form of government. Since then, I've come to realize that being a citizen is not about pledging allegiance to a flag, but is an active, never-ending pursuit to ensure that the values this country espouses and stands for are upheld. And since then, I've made it my business to continue to fight for those values, keeping in mind, in the words of Angela Davis, that freedom is a constant struggle. Nicole Hannah-Jones, the New York Times journalist and best-selling author of the 1619 Project, makes the case that it was Black Americans who became the essential guardians of American democracy, who demanded that America live up to its own promises, who fought not only for their own rights, but for the soul of this entire nation. If it wasn't for their struggle, the Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act of 1964 and 65 would not have been possible. Two landmark decisions that ended discrimination according to race and ethnic origin and removed barriers to voting, not just for Black Americans, but for every American. My parents came here searching for safety and possibility. They stayed out of politics and kept to themselves. They immersed themselves in the perceived safety of their community and saw themselves as guests in someone else's home. They didn't fully understand what it means to be an American. That being an American is all about challenging power. It is about checking power. America was founded on those principles from the time of the Revolutionary War, and you see it again and again throughout American history. When factory workers in Chicago demanded an 8-hour workday, they weren't being ungrateful, they were defining what America should be. When the civil rights movement refused to accept segregation, they weren't being loud, they were fulfilling the most fundamental promise of the Constitution, that all men are created equal. Even today, when young people march for immigrant rights or Palestinian rights, or when activists demand the end to endless wars, or when parents in small towns show up at school board meetings to defend diversity and inclusion, they're practicing the same American tradition. Ordinary people pushing back against power to expand the circle of belonging, not just for themselves, but for those yet to be born. In the past, as I mentioned, it was people of color, particularly Black people, who were at the forefront of preserving democracy, who risked their lives and the lives of loved ones to demand justice. Today, once again, we are facing an existential threat to our democracy. Once again, people have taken to the streets and are demanding justice. This time, we need those who have benefited from this system the most, white people, to step forward in a deeper way, to use the privilege that society has granted them, not simply to comfort, but for protection, to stand on the front lines when others are most vulnerable, to speak boldly and unequivocally when silence or triangulation would be easier. To call the ethnic cleansing and erasure of Palestinians by Israeli lunatics not just a crime against humanity, but a genocide. To call the war of aggression against Iran a violation of international law and human decency. To demand an end to the blockade on Cuba that is cutting off essential supplies of fuel, food, and medicine. To speak out when our government kills with impunity and assassinates people with drones. When our government kidnaps world leaders, when our government pirates ships and steals resources. Being silent is not enough. I'm asking people in this room to raise their voices. To put their bodies, their reputations, and even their safety on the line if necessary, just as others have done before in the past. This morning, I'm able to speak here because of people that have sacrificed on my behalf. And not just my behalf, but on the behalf of all of us. History does not ask everyone to carry the same burden, but it does ask everyone to carry their share. And if this truly is the moment when the old order of white supremacy is gasping for breath, then the question before us is simple. Will we stand on the sidelines while it thrashes violently in its final moments? Or will we step forward together and help usher something more just, more human, and more free? Because the future has never belonged to those who defended the old hierarchies. It has always belonged to those brave enough to dismantle them. Let's hold on to that faith and keep planting those seeds, knowing full well that the rains will come soon. Thank you.